Hello, Farmer Jason here at Wave Fruit Farm. This is our first video, and we want to show you some of the things that we do here on the farm, and we want to show you some educational things. There's a lot that goes into growing fruit. You might notice as I show you the tree behind you, though, that I'm moving a little slow, because the other part that we're going to show you in this YouTube channel is some of the crazy things we get into. Just 2 weeks ago, I fell off the back of a small little ATV pickup truck and broke 2 ribs, punctured a lung, and caused myself a lot of trouble. Wish we had been YouTubing at that point. We would have shown you some of what happened in that, but I'm still moving slowly because of that, so just bear with me as I show you these trees. Now, what you see behind me is called a standard apple tree. This is going to be our largest apple tree that we have. We only have a few here left on the farm, about 30 of them. Out of the 20,000 plus trees we have on the farm, only 30 are going to be standard apple trees. The reason is if you look behind me, you can see how tall this tree is, and you can see how tall of a ladder we have to use. It takes a lot of work to prune this tree, to climb it, to pick it, everything about it. It is the hardest apple tree we have to grow. This is what used to be the standard apple tree if you go back 40 years ago. This was the only size tree you could get. And so this is what they had. They were planted 40 by 40, so it meant you put one tree every 40 feet in a row and every 40 feet between them. So they were left a big area to grow, and they grew really big. The downside to that is the fact that the apples don't get nearly as nice, because the bigger the tree, trees either grow wood or they grow apples. And on these, they grow wood. And so they get really big, and they spend a lot of time growing branches and other parts of the trees and not really focusing on the apples. And additionally, we've already trimmed these trees for this year. So we've gone through and we've taken off all the suckers. It took us a long time. Each one of these trees takes over an hour to trim. And additionally, you can see some of the spots that I took off up in there. You can see some of the big chunks that I had to pull out, which was very dangerous to do also, because I had to stand on a ladder with a chainsaw and cut out the big chunks of trees. And so they just take a lot of work, and they take a long time to climb up to the top. So the apple industry has gone to much smaller trees, and that's what we're going to show you next. Something I want to point out, though, is people always ask if we plant our apple trees from seed. If you planted an apple tree from seed, this is the size tree you would get. This is the standard size that an apple would get out of a seed. But these trees behind me are called Ida red trees, which is a great apple for baking, for making apple pies, for making applesauce. The problem is, if you plant one of the apple seeds that come off this tree, it is not going to be an Ida red tree. No more than when people have children, their children is them. And so what happens is, just like us as humans, when these trees have their seeds, whenever you plant it, it's a genetic cross of whatever 2 things pollinated. So in the spring, the bees come from the apple trees you see over there a little bit further behind, over pollinate these apples with a different type of apple, and you come up with a wholly different thing. A lot of times they don't work out as being all that flavorful. And so out of every 1,000,000 times that happens, only 1 out of 1,000,000 actually tastes good, and those are the ones we find and select for. So whenever you actually grow a tree, we do it by cloning, but not the dolly the sheep kind of cloning, not an abnormal or unnatural type of cloning. A very natural thing where you take a cutting from this tree and you put it on a rootstock of another, and it grows the identical tree to this. And so that's how all of our trees are propagated. So again, this is our standard trees. This is what you get out of planting out of seed. This is going to be our biggest tree, but our hardest to work with. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pause, and we're going to go and we're going to move to our next smaller size of tree, which is called a semi-dwarf tree. And they're a little bit better, and then we're going to show you our dwarf trees. So bear with us as we switch positions, and we're going to come back and show you our semi-dwarf trees. All right, here we are. We're going to be moving orchards. We're going to cross the one state road that crosses through our orchards. You know, here at Wave Fruit Farm, we have a lot of different areas, and some of the areas we're not always cropping. And so you're going to see behind me sort of a very old combine and some corn that we let a neighboring farm do. We have a lot of acreage here at Wave Fruit Farm. We have almost 400 acres. Not that much of it's in trees, some of it's in actual forest. And so we have a lot of acreage here that we're that we're preserving and keeping natural. So we're gonna get out of my old farm truck here. Love my old farm truck, and we're gonna show you some of the different trees we have. All right, so hold on. All right, now we're in our orchards up top, on top of the mountain, and what you see behind me is a semi-dwarf tree. What this is this is gonna be the medium-sized trees. These are technically a rootstock. They're called an interstem rootstock, interstem 9111s. And what they do is they produce a little bit smaller tree than what you have down below as the standards. They're gonna be much more controlled. Those ones down below could get to 40 feet high. These we try to cap out right around 10, 11 feet high. That's where we get the maximum yield, as well as we can get up there with small ladders. It's easier to trim, it's easier to pick, it's easier to manage these trees. So these are untrimmed, unlike the ones down below that we've already gotten to trimming for the year. These are yet to be trimmed. So that'll be the next thing. All right, we're gonna move over to some other trees here too. I wanna show you something cool that we did a few years ago. Bear with me, still having a little bit of trouble from that rib. Right here, this is what we call a grafted tree. I was talking about how we have trees that we graft on top of them, and so that they're all identical clones. And what you can see on this tree right here is a spot where we actually took one type of tree and grafted a whole different tree on top of it. The variety that was on these we didn't like as much. They used to be Red Delicious trees. Most people aren't buying Red Delicious anymore, so we actually grafted some Golden Delicious on top of this. So we cut this tree off, even though it was a tall tree, just like the one that you saw beside me. We cut it off right there, and we actually put in 3 twigs from another Golden Delicious tree I had on the other side of the road, and we grew a brand new Golden Delicious tree on an old Red Delicious tree. So it's something cool that you can do. That's called grafting. That's how all of these things are done. When I was talking about the semi-dwarf trees, how we keep those dwarfed is by choosing a rootstock. Everything in apple growing right now is based upon rootstocks. And so on those 911s, when I'm given those numbers, that is the rootstock that we're grafting on top. That the scion, which is the trees you were looking at were gala. That's how we actually get that on there, is we graft a gala tree on top of a rootstock. And what that does is that controls how much vigor that tree has. And so that's what's really important. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to our dwarf trees that are really small. All right, we're here at the grafted trees. I was explaining to you how we like doing the grafts because it allows us to put a new tree. And the reason we do it is it grows the tree much faster. To plant a tree from the ground, it's gonna take 5-6 years to get up to full production. With these grafts, we can get up to full production within just a little bit of time. Probably within 2 years, we have a crop that's decent, and within 3 years, we're almost back at full crop because all the roots are established and the tree at the top grows very quickly. Now, as we were walking out of the orchard to go over the dwarf trees, we saw something we thought was pretty cool. One of the things that really love these grafted trees are birds. What they'll do is they build their nests right down inside the tree to where we can, they'll sit right in between where those 3 branches come up from the old tree and form the new tree. It creates a nice little hollow for the birds to hang out in. So we see that quite often. All right, now we're at our dwarf trees. These are gonna be our smallest trees. About 3 years ago, we planted almost 5,000 trees here on the farm. We planted a few varieties called Evercrisp, Fuji, Zestar, some of the newer varieties that have come out, we planted. What you see behind me is an Evercrisp tree. It's gonna be on the dwarfing rootstock of Bud 9. And so with that, the Bud 9 rootstock gets really small. It keeps that tree tiny. This tree has some more to go till it's full grown, but it won't get nearly as big as the rest. I have a wire here at 8 feet and the conduit goes up to 10 feet. And that's gonna be as tall as that tree gets. The tree's gonna be so weak that when it hits the top of that conduit, we actually have to tie the tree to it. So when it hits the top of that conduit, it's actually gonna fold over. So we make the top of the tree right around the conduit where it stays supported. These trees are so weak, we actually have to support the entire row of trees. So what we do is we have a huge post pounder that we pound these big posts in with. We then put a wire up on top, and then we put a conduit with each tree. And then we tie the tree with special rubber ties to the conduit, and it keeps all those trees from falling over. The one year we planted some trees, they got 2 years old before we got the wire up, and they broke off right at that joint union. Where we graft the trees is right down here. Below that's going to be your rootstock, and above that's going to be your scion. And so right here on these trees, they're very, very fragile. They will break. But that's also the most important part. That has to be just out of the soil when we plant them. If you plant them too deep, they'll become a standard tree like down below, because this top part will root into the ground. So height of planting is vastly important, and something we'll cover at some point when we plant some trees down the road. But on this, we have these dwarf trees tied to the wire growing up. Now we still have to trim these. They're way too aggressive right now. We'll trim them back. We'll show you how to trim each one of the styles of trees. Can't show you how to trim standard because we've already done them, but we'll show you the semi-dwarf and dwarf tree on how to trim them coming up in future episodes if you subscribe. Hey, we've had a great time being with you today. You know, this is just the beginning of it. Please subscribe. You can always email us. We do have a website, www.wavefruitfarm.com, as well as Facebook and Instagram. Please follow us on those things. And if you have any questions for us, shoot them to us and we'll cover it in the following YouTube episode. Thanks so much for coming along today.